Today is the 17th of September, and this is the 59th time we are speaking on the Majjhima Nikaya Suttas. Tonight we come to Sutta 141, Saccavibhanga Sutta, the exposition of the truths. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Benares in the deer park at Isipatana. There he addressed the monks thus, "Monks, Noble Sir," they replied. The Blessed One said, "At Benares, monks, in the deer park at Isipatana, the Tathagata Arahan Sammasambuddha sat rolling the matchless wheel of the Dhamma, which cannot be stopped by any recluse or Brahmin or God or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world, that is, the announcing, teaching, describing, establishing, revealing, expounding, and exhibiting of the Four Noble Truths." Of what four? The announcing, teaching, describing, establishing, revealing, expounding, and exhibiting of the Noble Truth of suffering. The announcing, teaching, describing, establishing, revealing, expounding, and exhibiting of the Noble Truth of the origin of suffering. Similarly, of the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, of the Noble Truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. At Benares, monks, in the deer park at Isipatana, the Tathagata Arahan Sammasambuddha sat rolling the matchless wheel of the Dhamma, which cannot be stopped by any recluse or Brahmin, or God, or Mara, or Brahma, or anyone in the world, that is, the announcing, teaching, describing, establishing, revealing, expounding, and exhibiting of these Four Noble Truths. Cultivate the friendship of Sariputta and Moggallana monks. Associate with Sariputta and Moggallana. They are wise and helpful to their companions in the holy life. Sariputta is like a mother. Moggallana is like a nurse. Sariputta trains others for the fruit of stream entry. Moggallana for the supreme goal. Sariputta monks is able to announce, teach, describe, establish, reveal, expound, and exhibit the Four Noble Truths. So the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Sublime One rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha said, he first taught the Dhamma at Isipatana, in the deer park. There he first taught the Dhamma to his 5 disciples, and over a period of a few days, and they understood, and all 5 of them became Arahants. And the Buddha said, cultivate the friendship of Sariputta and Moggallana, the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha. And the Buddha said, Sariputta is like a mother, Moggallana is like a nurse. A mother gives birth to children, right? So Sariputta, he teaches the monks so that they become Aryans. They enter the stream, become Aryans. So in that sense, he gives birth to Aryans. They are born into the Aryahood. And then Moggallana is like a nurse. A nurse brings them up to maturity, brings them up to Arahanthood. But don't be misled by this, that Sariputta can only teach the monks to become stream winners or stream enterers. There are several suttas where Sariputta taught the Dhamma and the monks attained to Arahanthood. But Sariputta, being the most senior disciple and the chief in wisdom, the Buddha says that Sariputta turns the Dhamma wheel exactly like the Buddha. So he teaches a lot. So because he teaches a lot, many of the monks attain stream entry with his help. And then because Venerable Moggallana has psychic power, can read their minds, then he's able to help them further and attain Arahanthood. Then soon after the Blessed One had gone, The Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks thus, "Friends, monks." "Friend," the monks replied to the Venerable Sariputta. The Venerable Sariputta said, "At Benares, friends, in the deer park at Isipatana, the Tathagata Arahant Sammasambuddha sat rolling the matchless wheel of the Dhamma and exhibiting of the Four Noble Truths." Of what four? The announcing, etc., and exhibiting of the noble truth of suffering, of the noble truth of the origin of suffering, of the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and of the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And what, friends, is the noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, dying or death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what wants is suffering. In short, the five aggregates of attachment are suffering. And what, friends, is birth? The birth of beings into the various orders of beings. Their coming to birth, precipitation in a womb, generation, the manifestation of the aggregates, obtaining the basis for contact. This is called birth. And what, friends, is aging? The aging of beings in the various orders of beings. Their old age, brokenness of teeth, greyness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of life, weakness of faculties. This is called aging. And what, friends, is dying? The passing of beings out of the various orders of beings, their passing away, dissolution, disappearance, death, completion of time, dissolution of aggregates, laying down of the body. This is called dying. And what, friends, is sorrow? The sorrow, sorrowing, sorrowfulness, inner sorrow, inner sorriness of one who has encountered some misfortune or is affected by some painful state. This is called sorrow. And what, friends, is lamentation? The wail and lament, wailing and lamenting, bewailing and lamentation of one who has encountered some misfortune or is affected by some painful state. This is called lamentation. Stop here for a moment. This noble truth of suffering, the first noble truth, suffering is a translation for dukkha. Sometimes the translation, sometimes people like to use unsatisfactoriness. Life is unsatisfactory. But suffering would be probably a more better translation. And a lot of people find it hard to accept that life is suffering because as a human being, our life is comparatively happy, comparatively good. But if you were to see the ghost realm, like the Buddha can see, or the animal realm or the hell realm, then you realize that life is really suffering. So the Buddha says, what do you mean by suffering? Being born is suffering, aging is suffering, dying is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what you want is suffering. In short, the five aggregates of attachment are suffering. So, birth here is described, coming to being, coming to birth, aging of beings, brokenness of teeth, greyness of hair, wrinkling of skin, decline of life, weakness of faculties, dying, passing away, dissolution, sorrow, lamentation, etc. And what, friends, is pain? Bodily discomfort, painful, uncomfortable feeling born of bodily contact. This is called pain. And what, friends, is grief? Mental pain, mental discomfort, painful, uncomfortable feeling born of mental contact. This is called grief. And what, friends, is despair? The trouble and despair, the tribulation and desperation of one who has encountered some misfortune or is affected by some painful state. This is called despair. And what, friends, is not to obtain what one wants is suffering. To being subject to birth, there comes the wish, oh, that we were not subject to birth. That birth would not come to us, but this is not to be obtained by wishing, and not to obtain what one wants is suffering. To being subject to aging, subject to sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, there comes the wish, oh, that we were not subject to This aging, sickness, dying, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair. But this is not to be obtained by wishing, and not to obtain what one wants is suffering. And what, friends, are the 5 aggregates of attachment that in short are suffering? They are the material form aggregate or the body aggregate of attachment, the feeling aggregate of attachment, perception aggregate of attachment, volition aggregate of attachment, consciousness aggregate of attachment. These are the 5 aggregates of attachment that in short are suffering. This is called the noble truth of suffering. Stop here for a moment. So here it's quite clear what it means by pain. Pain is bodily pain. Grief is mental pain. Despair, not to get what you want. Here the Buddha specifically talks about birth, not to get, not to be reborn, and not to be sick, not to age and all that. But anything in the world that we want and we cannot get is also suffering. And then in brief or in short, the Buddha says that the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. These 5 aggregates are body, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. The last 4, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, can be said to be mind. So the 5 aggregates are body and mind. And these 5 aggregates we always identify with ourselves. For most people, we identify the body and the mind as I or mine, or I am in these 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates are inside me. So because we consider these 5 aggregates to be I and mine, we attach to it. We attach to it, and when it changes, because all things in the world are impermanent, then we are not. We suffer when it changes, because we don't want the 5 aggregates to change. We don't want the 5 aggregates to become sick, to become old and to die. And what, friends, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering? It is craving which brings renewal of being. It is accompanied by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And what, friends, is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It is the remainderless fading away and ceasing, the giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting of that same craving. This is called the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. Stop here a moment. So here the Buddha says the origin of suffering is craving, which brings renewal of being. And this craving, there are 3 types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, that means craving for sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, and we can also include thoughts. So this is worldly pleasure. Most people, because we don't know of any pleasure higher than this pleasure, so worldly people will indulge in sensual pleasure, and they feel they must indulge in sensual pleasure because the world is suffering. Even if they don't indulge in sensual pleasure, life is so boring. They want excitement, they want happiness, they want enjoyment. So this enjoyment comes from enjoying beautiful sights, sounds, smells, taste and touch, especially the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. And then the second type of craving is craving for being. That means craving for existence. We want to continue to be, to be alive. So when most people die, the craving to live is so strong. It brings them to rebirth again. The craving for non-being. There are 2 types. One is worldly craving for non-being. That means somebody is overwhelmed by suffering. For example, a person's financial empire collapses due to economic recession. Sometimes you see in the newspaper, I remember many years ago, there's one Japanese man clutching all his share certificates. He jumped down from a very high building and died. because his share certificates became worthless. So this is craving for non-being. You want to stop existing because life is so much suffering for you. You can't bear it. This happens very often. I see in the papers some people commit suicide for various reasons. Young men might be broken-hearted because got jilted and they commit suicide, and similarly for young girls, etc. Then the other type of craving for non-being is a person on the holy path. A person on the holy path, if the desire to become liberated from existence is too strong, then he goes into all kinds of unbeneficial ascetic practices. Like the Buddha, for many years, 6 years, he went through all the various ascetic practices because the desire to be liberated was so strong that he tried everything. But the Buddha says you cannot be liberated that way, because when you crave for liberation, the mind is very agitated, and the agitated mind cannot enter Nibbana. Nibbana is a cool state. The mind got to be completely cool and desireless. You don't want anything, then only you can be liberated. So these are the three cravings. And the cessation of suffering is obtained by letting go of that craving, all the three types of craving. And what, friends, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It is just this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right recollection, and right concentration. And what, friends, is right view? Knowledge of suffering, knowledge of the origin of suffering, knowledge of the cessation of suffering, and knowledge of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. This is called right view. And what, friends, is right thought? Thought of renunciation, thought of non-ill will, and thought of non-cruelty. This is called right thought. And what, friends, is right speech? Abstaining from false speech, abstaining from malicious speech, abstaining from harsh speech, abstaining from idle chatter. This is called right speech. And what, friends, is right action? Abstaining from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, from misconduct in sensual pleasures. This is called right action. And what, friends, is right livelihood? Here a noble disciple, having abandoned wrong livelihood, earns his living by right livelihood. This is called right livelihood. Stop here for a moment. So here the Noble Eightfold Path consists of 8 factors. The first and most important one is right view. We read in an earlier sutta that to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, you must attain right view first. If you don't attain right view, you have not entered the Noble Eightfold Path. So the first factor to be practiced is right view. You need to obtain right view. And right view here is defined as knowledge of the 4 noble truths concerning suffering. And then right thoughts is the opposite of wrong thoughts. So the opposite of wrong thoughts is renunciation, non-ill will, and non-cruelty. Right speech, there are 4 factors in right speech. Lying, abstaining from lying, abstaining from carrying tales. You hear A talk about B, you should not report to B that A said such and such bad things about him. And then abstaining from harsh or coarse speech, and abstaining from idle chatter or gossip. Idle chatter or gossip means unbeneficial talk, unbeneficial speech. And right action is not to kill, not to take what is not given, and not to engage in sexual misconduct. And right livelihood is to earn your livelihood in a way that does not harm other living beings and not harm yourself. And what, friends, is right effort? Here among awakened zeal for the non-arising of unarisen evil and wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. He awakens zeal for the abandoning of arisen evil and wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. He awakens zeal for the arising of unarisen, wholesome states, and he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. He awakens zeal for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase and fulfillment by development of arisen, wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind and strives. This is called right effort. And what, friends, is right recollection? Here a monk abides contemplating the body in the body, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings and feelings, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind in mind, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating Dhamma in Dhamma, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. This is called right recollection. And what, friends, is right concentration? Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a monk enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind, without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. With the fading away as well of delight, he abides in equanimity, mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. He enters upon and abides in the third jhana, on account of which noble ones announce, he has a pleasant abiding, who has equanimity and is mindful. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and utter purity of mindfulness and equanimity. This is called right concentration. This is called the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. At Benares, friends, in the deer park at Isipatana, the Tathagata Arahant Sammasambuddha sat rolling the matchless wheel of the Dhamma, which cannot be stopped by any recluse or Brahmin, or God or Mara or Brahma, or anyone in the world. That is, the announcing, teaching, describing, establishing, revealing, expounding, and exhibiting of these four noble truths. That is what the Venerable Sariputta said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Sariputta's words. That's the end of the sutta. So here, right effort is to always examine the mind and prevent unarisen, evil, unwholesome states from arising. And if evil, unwholesome states have already arisen, then to abandon it quickly. And then to make effort for the arising of unarisen, wholesome states of mind. And if wholesome states of mind has already arisen, then to develop it, to continue it. This is called right effort. This right effort is very important because a lot of people in the spiritual path, we forget that what is important in the spiritual path is to change our character, to get rid of unwholesome states and to develop wholesome states. Unwholesome states of mind are those states that give you suffering. For example, greed, hatred, jealousy, restlessness, sloth and torpor, doubt, worry, all these are unwholesome states. And wholesome states of mind are those that are the opposite, non-greed, non-hatred or non-anger, tranquility, concentration, etc. And then this right recollection, sometimes it's translated as right mindfulness. But then we have to remember this sati, samasati, right recollection, it is not general mindfulness. It can be translated as mindfulness, provided we know that it is a specific mindfulness. Mindfulness only towards four things, four objects of sati, body, feelings, mind and Dhamma. So because it is a specific type of mindfulness, basically it means remembering to contemplate these four things. That's why it is called recollection. And right concentration, as you can see here, in the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, right concentration is always the 4 jhanas. Because the Buddha says, when a person attains the 4 jhanas, he gets rid of the 5 hindrances that prevent wisdom from arising, prevent you from seeing things as they really are. So that's why we need to attain the jhanas to see things as they really are and attain wisdom. So this is a basic description of the 4 noble truths. This description of the 4 noble truths is also seen in several other suttas.